All right. Welcome. Good evening to this first edition of World of Sales. And this is a program that is dedicated to sales folks, a sales process, and anything that is salesy. We will be talking in the next few minutes about sales as a definition, sales as an industry, sales as a trade, sales as a career path, as well as how sales is perceived by the rest of the world. And then ultimately, the following sessions or the following episodes of this particular topic or talk show will shed the light more on specific levels and steps of the selling process, entitled Effective Selling. So those will be a couple of sessions that will break down the whole path of a salesperson and what they do need to do to be successful in their business, because we are gonna see now, as we will be discussing live on what is sales and why sales and what's the taboo about sales and whether it's needed or not. And so all these questions that are out there and that salespeople face on a day-to-day basis. One of the biggest ones that I've experienced personally is salespeople are bad, they lie, they're not good, they're hated, things like that. So we'll cover more of that as we proceed in this particular programming. Again, we do have a live stream, and I'm not sure how's the quality. It looks like it's buffering right now. So on the radio, if you're listening in, we will still proceed. And I do have some, I guess, technical difficulties on my feed here on the live YouTube. So we'll probably have to do a rerun of this particular show. But in the meantime, I'm gonna proceed. So first things first, sales. What is sales? And that's the biggest question. Is there a necessity for it? Yeah, so I would say yes. Being a salesperson, personally, I've lived, breathed, and enjoyed the sales world, period and out. I will still do it. I'm always going to be a salesperson in my blood, in my DNA. This is also a dedication, type of concept. So you're in it for life. You cannot really get out of it. Some people may do it for a minute, as a just a side gig, but for me, it's been pretty much a path, a career. And as I joke in my trainings when I train sales teams, and I always say this, we all talk. We talk all the time, everywhere, with people, with friends, and sometimes we talk nonsense and BS and all the other. But the bottom line is, what if we used that talking and actually did something well with it and help people, at the same time help ourselves by making a decent amount of money the right way, of course. And so therefore sales. I did read once, and I do believe in this, that if you're in business, you're in sales. And I do not know of any business that has started not to grow, and of a business that has started not to make money. And if that is the case, any business would probably be a couple of things. It's either a service provider or product provider for the most part, and that can be a multitude of things. But neither here and there. If we break it down, if you start anything to produce or serve the rest of us, you are actually in the business of selling something somehow. So whether you're selling physical goods, or you're selling a particular service that is helping others, and it doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what the end use is. At the end of the day, of course, we're talking legal sales here. The end of it is that it is a sales transaction, and therefore, while there might be sales that are done and conducted in a way that it doesn't require an individual to actually present the actual offering to a consumer or prospect, there are, obviously sales that are made through web, profiles and, different marketing campaigns, and people just buy, because they see something, they click on a link and they buy it. That's great. That is a sales transaction, and just not driven by a salesperson, but by a sales process. So, but in the meantime, for us salespeople, individuals who are immersed and actually make a living in sales, and there's a joke: salespeople are the second most hated people on the planet, and I'm gonna say the first ones, as I've always been told, the lawyers, and that's because lawyers are very tough and they get things done, and so do sales, and sometimes you can't get away with them, and so I think in that's really what the analogy is. Well, it's a not a positive analogy, and oftentimes I actually in my trainings I do tell people that as a joke, but also I emphasize on the idea that while there's always going to be a person or a few people that will give a bad name to any industry or any type of job or career or function, that doesn't mean that the rest of us are bad. And if people do the right thing, by the right training and follow the guidelines of their companies, as well as, really, really understand what sales and sales psychology and all the things that are, the components of sales, then they will never be portrayed as such, and therefore they will be saviors. That's how I see salespeople. I encourage every salesperson out there, and believe it or not, everybody is a salesperson, and I'll get to that in a minute. So just because we choose to actually use it to make money and help others, people are selling every day in their life. As a matter of fact, people start selling from an early age, and literally once they become, a little bit of, past the infancy stages, they actually start becoming salespeople. And even in the infancy stage, they cry, you buy it, you give them milk. You cry, you buy it, you pick them up. So babies actually the first salespeople on the planet, but it gets from there on. Kids always get what they want. They're sales, a salesy without knowing it. And it's something that we have as human nature. You evolve into it, and make it worth a career, or you can just, be frustrated and not be able to do it. Ultimately, it takes to be a people person. It takes for you to be ongoing and outgoing. It takes for you to be able to express yourself correctly. And, again, there is also a whole different, concept to it. And the concept, as I define it, is two pieces primarily. One is it is an art. And the art is basically how it's done. It's the methodology and things like that. And, there is a science, which is the specific measures and steps you will take as a salesperson or a sales individual to make, a sales, transaction happen from, prospecting to closing and following up and so on and so forth. So there are multiple levels of sales steps that you have to go to get an actual success, and you just have to get good at it eventually in time. It is for not for everyone. It is for people that have the drive, and also you have to be able to take rejection, because in sales we get rejected all the time, and that's okay. There is a big saying in the sales world that says salesmanship begins when the customer says no. And yet, we love the no, because actually when you tell me no, there's an objection there, and we'll talk about objections later. So I need to know why the no. And if you did actually a good job as a salesperson in advance of any conversation, your homework, your pre-work, and your prospecting, and you did all the prep stuff that you need to do before. And I'm cutting short a little bit of these terminologies because I want to go through them as we go through the presentation, in the next few sessions. And but if you did the right thing and you did the right job, you would be able to actually get the best deal out of your presentation, ultimately closed. Now, the success of sales is not measured by you selling every person, because you might not to. And the word selling actually sometimes is literally synonymous to like pushy and stuff. Not necessarily true. If you have the right product and the right service, and you understand it, and you actually do the right work and pre-work to find the right customers and have the right offering for them, there's no reason for you actually not to have a transaction. The mistake people make is typically going for someone that may not have any interest in whatever you are selling. And therefore it becomes a difficult task, and maybe you waste a lot of time on that particular individual versus the other one, which will be ready to buy. So these are all things that we struggle with in the sales world, and there is no win 100%. I mean, the best of us have good days. but you might also have bad days. The key here is to have a lot more good days than bad days, and so that's really where we actually tend to want to focus our efforts on. So again, art, science. The science is the steps that you have to take, and they're very measurable. They are smart, and we'll talk about the SMART objectives and the SMART components as a concept. Specific, measurable, and so on and so forth. And then there's also different formulas that you have to address and follow step one, step two to the end. And if you did exactly how and I'll give you the actual formula, it's not a secret. It's not a matter of knowing the formula, it's also knowing how to apply it and execute on it, like everything else. You can take the horse to the water, as they say, can't make it drink. Same thing, you can give a formula to anyone, doesn't mean that they're going to succeed on it. And I've seen in my career path a lot of salespeople that make it and others don't. Doesn't mean that they're bad people, doesn't mean that anything. Some companies, they have specific measures and goals and targets and performance metrics. And ultimately, if you choose a sales career, sales metrics are part of it, performance is part of it. You deliver, you don't. I personally been through it, through the trenches, and moved my way up the ladder of sales, leadership. But at the end of the day, it remains the same. The same steps are taken by everyone, and some of us do succeed. A lot of us do succeed, then at different levels. And of course, others, they just don't have the right stamina to keep up with it. Again, it's pressure. That's another thing that people have to be able to work under, because it's not an easy picnic. You wake up every morning, there's a target that you have to go after. It is determined by the hierarchies above, and sometimes it's determined by the nature of the business. But again, at the end of the day, every business, if you're looking and watching or listening right now at my video or on the radio, you would know that one thing. There is a transaction if you open a business as an actual investor, as an actual business person or business owner. You want your business to succeed, and so the individuals that are working for you, whether they're salespeople in general, they need to do their job. I have seen I've had actually seen a lot of bad salespeople in my life as well, that I encounter in different places. In my personal dealings as just an individual, and sometimes you do comment, sometimes you don't, but their approach is wrong, and those are some of the things. And there's a lot of coaching on sales everywhere on YouTube. There's a lot of presentations, conferences, and things like that. I personally specialize in the sales in the insurance world, and more specifically the Medicare and Medicaid government program space. And I've been doing that from the last 25 years, actually 26 now. So in a lot of it is, I started as a salesperson in the field, and then ultimately, managed a lot of sales teams and directed them, and, run the whole sales division over time. But at the end of the day, you remain a salesperson. Your the thought process is always that you always pitch in. That's the other thing. I mean, you're always going to be pitching at any level of your sales career. So whether you're direct consumer sales or you're actually selling, to your, hierarchies, you still have to pitch. And why? And people tell you, why we're going to do it this way? How we're going to do it? Why not the other way? Tell us how it is. So you have to do your presentations and always break it down to the level where people see and get a comfort, level. So they might not, buy a service from you, but they buy the concept, the idea. So ultimately they can support you in your stuff. And this is more advanced selling in terms of if you have a career path that you want to pursue as a sales leader. We will have different topics and different opportunities to discuss those aspects of it and how to manage those hurdles. In the meantime, just going back to the basics again, just to recap, sales is a necessary evil. Whether people like it or not, there will be sales transactions and there will be salespeople. We as the sales people, individuals who choose a career path in sales, we have to accept the fact that we're not always going to be liked by default, not because we're bad people, is because we tend to be pushy, or at least we're determined, we have a drive, we actually have targets, we always go after our targets. And some of us are pushier than others. Some of us use the pushy piece in a negative way, and they don't know how to use it and leverage it in the right way. You don't have to be pushy to get anything you want. As there's the widely statement that says you can do better with honey than with vinegar. So it's how you do it, your style, and there's a lot of ways that you can approach your customer and whoever that be. Whether it's an actual prospect that's buying from you or an audience that you have to pitch an idea or concept to. One way or the other, you have to have the ability and the talent to do it. And when you sell into consumers, also there's different levels of how you do it, how you succeed. Some people have a comfort zone to speak one-on-one easily. Some people are a little bit more timid and shy. They may not have the same, I guess, eloquency or at least the drive to be able to do this, in a smooth way. But there are people that actually might want to do it in the form of a group, presentation, and that's not for everyone. But it can be done, and people get intimidated sometimes, which is, again, public speaking is not a comfort zone for everyone, and everybody gets a little bit of anxiety at a point or another in their life. It takes some practice, and over time you get good at it, and you can do it. The main thing is understanding what you're selling and having the full knowledge of what you're actually going to be talking about. That's a key thing. If you don't know it, and if you're not good at what what you're doing, you're not going to be able to present properly. You're not going to be able to share your ideas and convince that particular consumer or prospect of what you actually pitch in. And so it is important, and especially if you are talking to an educated consumer that does their due diligence and to identify and find out more about what's available to them. And so when they meet with you and they agree to meet with you, they obviously have an actual content behind them. They have some background of what you are trying to offer. So they might ask the right questions, the difficult questions, and they have to be prepared. And we're going to talk about everything from soup to nuts when it comes to a selling process before you even meet with somebody, when you get into a sales concept, and so on and so forth, and then ultimately by the end, how to get through certain steps. Now, I've mentioned earlier that I've done a lot of sales in the insurance industry, but also did it in real estate, personally as an agent, also as an instructor, as a licensed instructor for New York law, real law, and so I was giving courses on the actual pre-licensing classes, but also did sales trainings for the actual real estate agents and agencies. So again, different industries. Sales concepts don't vary much. They're about the same. It's just you have to adapt them to any industry, whether you sell medical supplies, pharmaceutical, products, cars, anything. I mean, there is a particular sequence of things that had to happen. There's events that have to take place, and there are steps you have to take and measures you have to take place to get it done. And then the way you do it, I mean, every artist, let's say you take a painter, right? They all have, to have canvas, whatever, they're going to use to paint. They need to have some sort of a color and brush, to actually do the painting. However, each one of them has a different style and how they approach it. And that's what gives them their unique, presence. Same thing in sales. You have certain steps, you have certain things that you have to have in place, tools, and then ultimately your personality, your approach, your touch, and those are your little and your arts, your style are going to make the difference between one salesperson versus the other. We can be two of us selling the same product. One of us may succeed and the others may not. And again, seen that, been there, not that, seen it a lot in some of the teams where you have always a couple of people that are superstars. And when you ask them what they do, when they tell you, I do everything, and some people they're just not able to do and take it to that next level. Again, so those are just some basic elements. So now we can move to the next item, which is the actual essence of selling, right? So you're gonna present something to someone or some group, and whatever that is, again, you need to know what that is that you're selling. So you have to learn your business. You have to understand your business. You have to have the knowledge and read the details, understand what you're presenting, be able to answer all the questions. Because majority of sales fail, at the end and do not close because you are not able to answer all the questions that a prospect may have. Now, the key term prospect ultimately, for all of us, just to define is whoever is a potential, consumer or customer or client that you're going to be engaging with, and ultimately, will become a client, permanently a member, a customer, or recurring, member or customer. So there's a keyword prospecting. So first, knowledge, you got to know your stuff. Second is, well, where do I find these people? And marketing is a very, big industry itself that supports the sales concepts. And salespeople are marketers, but there's also marketers that help salespeople. And there are a lot of ways you could prospect. And, the ideal ones, you do campaigns, mailers, you can do, health fairs, places where people are gathering, whatever, depending on what your type of sale is, your audience you're going to have. If you're in pharmaceutical sales, well, your audience is doctors. So you have, but it's a different strategy to work with pharma, because again, they get assigned territories and they have to go to specific doctors and pitch them, the medications and, the benefits of that particular medication and so on and so forth. That's a different sale. If you're in real estate, you have to find people that are selling or, either selling their property, buying the property, looking for a lease or looking for a tenant. So if you're in insurance, somebody is requiring some sort. We all need insurance. We live in the United States, at least for those of us in the States. I know that we have audience around the world, but for those of us in the US, we don't have social, insurance. So we don't have social healthcare. So therefore you have to have some sort of insurance to protect you in the event that you get sick. And so therefore you have to acquire some sort of a policy to protect you, to provide you with coverage when you need to seek a medical treatment at a facility, at a provider, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be using some terms that may be generic to me and in my industry, but maybe not to everyone, but I'll try to dummy it down. So again, providers in our world is medical doctors or hospitals or clinics or specialists, and that's the generic term. And so at the end of the day is, if you're selling to those folks, if you're looking for insurance, to pay or help you pay for some of those costs, you ultimately need to have an insurance policy. Therefore, you got to find a policy that makes sense for you. So if you're doing the commercial world, so it depends if you're an individual, if you're buying for your family, your kids, if you have a business, you want to do it for your employees. All these are different types of insurance products that are out there. And if you have a long-term need and you need to buy some sort of an added value insurance policy, you can do it for for long-term care, and so on and so forth. But there are other insurance that are individual, and for example, one of the spaces that I've worked on for the last couple of decades is Medicare. And so Medicare, and we'll talk about it in a different segment, a talk show, which is the senior health. It is a program that people earn, based on their, contribution over the years, and when they reach a certain age, or if they acquire, if they have a certain disability over a certain period of time, they'll be able to actually qualify for the Medicare. They have to contribute some, to it, on an ongoing basis. Some of it is already pre-contributed through their, Social Security checks or payments, while they were working. Anyways, that's not the topic for the day, but if you're in those types of sales, you have to find an audience that actually has Medicare. We refer to as the red, white, blue card. So again, if you're, in a selling insurance for the uninsured, so now we're talking about the ACA, which is like, formerly known as Obamacare, or you're looking at the, Child Health Plus or CHIP programs around the states. There's also a component of Medicaid, although the Medicaid plans right now, there is no active selling, so there's not much salespeople doing, the transactions that are driven by individuals directly. It's all state, managed right now at this point, for the most part. But so those are some. Now, again, if you're selling cars, it's the same thing. While people come to you in a car dealership, I've actually been in a car dealership myself, and you can walk in and there are like 5 salespeople. Some are better than others. I've had them all, good, bad, and ugly. And depending on some dealerships, they have incentives, and so there's competition. People are very aggressive. And some other dealerships, they don't have that, so it's a shared type of status. So there is no aggressive salespeople that are fighting for commission, for example. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they're negative, but those are some of the drivers where people tend to be more aggressive and pushy, and therefore create an element of where people are not so pleased with the actual performance or happy with the actual interaction with those individuals. So that being said, so now you're in sales, doesn't matter what you're selling, doesn't matter what your career path in the sales, what your products or services will be. You'll obviously want, and by the way, another thing that I forgot to mention is that you're in sales, there's different levels of sales. If you are an actual telesalesperson, right? So it's a little different type of sale. You're on the phone, you don't have a personal, direct contact with an individual where there is, physical, there's body language, things like that. It's more voice and, tone. So if you're on the phone, and again, I've had a lot of call centers under my wing, and when you're training call centers, it's a little different than you're training like, field, agents or field reps. Field agents, they actually tend to be more personalized because they actually one-on-one, they sit down, people are looking at them, they can see them physically. On the phone, you have to create the perception of you being in front of them, and we'll talk about that type of, opportunity itself, in a different, section. And if not today, obviously at a different talk show. I mean, this is an ongoing show that we will have regularly, and it's again World of Sales. But we'll talk about some of the stuff. We'll come back to some of this basic, but we'll also discuss other items. And I will also suggest that if you have suggestions, questions about how to approach your sales end of it, or if you have struggles and maybe you require some assistance, and I know you probably have training through your agencies or whatever, and some places may not even have solid training that is dedicated to sales. And so I've seen places where they have training departments, but they don't have sales experts within the sales training department. So it's always the sales management team that actually provides the sales training. And again, if those same folks did not have enough training themselves, it becomes a little bit difficult because they only teach some of the stuff that they know, but they may not know everything about sales. Now, again, it's a very in-depth world. There's a lot of stuff, and I try to summarize it, try to concise it to a degree, so it becomes very easy for us here on the station and for you guys as the audience. But again, like I said, the purpose of my station is to bring in anything that is to do with health and healthcare. And because I come from the world of sales in the healthcare industry, that's dear to me. So I dedicated a couple of sessions or talk shows just to the professionals in the insurance world, but of course it can go beyond them to anyone that has some sort of affinity for sales. So the next steps is, now of course you have your knowledge, great, so you get through your product training, you get through all the stuff, you have your policies, your things, your company teaches you all the good stuff that you need. But now, so how do you proceed? People finish training and they're like, whoops, what am I going to do now? And that becomes another issue. So in training, if you're a true trainer or a true sales leader, you need to make sure that you teach your teams. And again, I'm addressing everybody here at different levels. So if you're just a plain, field agent or telesales or sales agent period, is one level. But if you're a manager of sales and a leader in the sales world, there are things and requirements that will help you guide your teams to do better and be better at what they are doing. And ultimately they'll succeed, then you will succeed and your company will grow and flourish. So it's one thing that leads to the other, but at the end it takes small, components, and together, you get a bigger picture. So it's like a puzzle, one piece at a time. And if you have them all, you get a clear, beautiful, picture in front of you. So one thing that people fail to do in sales once they're into it, okay, I got this, I'm just gonna go out there and wing it. Well, there's no winging. If you wing it, it's gonna be exactly, not a good outcome. You want to have, reps. So one of my favorite, one of my best, friends and partners in crime in the sales world over the years, and a true salesman, himself, had a very, very, interesting, I guess, saying, which he learned. We both actually learned it at a particular training back in the days, and it's very simple. It's called the 5 Ps: prior planning prevents poor performance. So If you don't plan, you do plan that you're gonna. If you, it's there's the other one that says fail to plan, plan to fail. So it's the same concept. So if you're not prepped, if there is no work, you're probably not going to have the best outcome. Now you might get lucky here and there, but you want to prepare yourself, before you do everything. So again, language, your look, your way you dress, all that stuff can make a difference. Being early to whatever you're going, having a strategy to what you're going to be doing. If you're assigned a certain territory, you need to know your territory. All those things are dynamics that you have to be comfortable with. You need to know your audience. Your target audience is who you're going to be selling to, where they are, how can you approach them, where can you approach them, when can you approach them. And the reason I say when, because I worked with the senior market for many years. And even when I was at early ages as the one of the agents in the field, seniors are early risers, and you know what? If you're not out there early on, you might miss them. And so we used to actually have appointments as early as 6:30 in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, to actually meet people.